Welcome to the James Bond Book Club. Hosted by me, John Bleasdale. And welcome to the James Bond Book Club. My name is Bleasdale, John Bleasdale, and I am joined by Alice Dryden. That's the best way of introducing people on a James Bond podcast, I feel. How are you, Alice?
Oh, very well, thanks. Yeah, I try to introduce myself that way as well, as often as possible.
Does it ever come off as smoothly as it does in the Bond films?
No, I don't think people are impressed at all, to be honest. They just ask me to spell it.
Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Ian Fleming's third novel, James Bond novel, Moonraker. And before we get right into that, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you got into Bond to begin with.
Well, it actually began with the spoofs. For me, I was a big fan of Get Smart, which was a spy spoof sitcom from the 60s, Channel 4 showed it in my childhood, and a lot of the episodes had titles that parodied Bond books and films. There was Dr. Yes, there was Bronzefinger, and I found a copy of Dr. No in the charity book basket at the Happy Shopper up the road from my family home, and I read it and I was just hooked. So I actually got started on the books before the films.
Oh, isn't that interesting? And also the fact that you sort of came via the parodies. It's like someone getting into the Avengers via Austin Powers.
No bad thing if that happened.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you're a fan of sort of all things spy-ish?
Yes. I think ever since those Osborne books of how to be a spy with all the little cartoon characters running around in trench coats, I fancied that life.
I mean, it's also interesting that you're talking about the Avengers. There was that period in British television where there were lots of sort of the Avengers, Prisoner. There were lots of Danger Man. It just seemed to be, I guess it was the Cold War had everyone thinking in that way.
Yes, and in America, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is another huge thing for me. In fact, my love of Bond and 60s spy things led me on to a general love of the 60s and the music, the fashion, the movies. So I was the target market for Austin Powers when that appeared. I was delighted.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I think I saw the second one first as well. I saw the sequel in the cinema, and I don't think I've roared, much to the embarrassment of the people I was with, as appreciatively as before any film comedy.
Yeah, I think I saw a trailer when I was actually going to see Tomorrow Never Dies with my friend Paul, who is also a massive spy fan, and we just looked at each other and went, "Oh, we're going to that. That's going to be so cool."
Tomorrow Never Dies. That's another great one. Okay, let's get on to the books. Moonraker is, as I already said, the third outing for James Bond. So we're still in a sort of a nascent stage. He's not exactly embryonic. He's already had two outings, so we kind of know the routine. But at the same time, he isn't necessarily fully formed. Do you think is that fair to say?
Yes, I think we know a lot about him. There's a lot about his car. We see more of his private life here. We get a little intro. He's not dumped straight into the mission, but it's also one that jumps off the track a bit. The pattern has been Bond goes somewhere exotic. He goes to the French coast. He goes to the Caribbean, to New York, and this one is all set in the south of England, in London and Kent, which is one of the things I love about it. It's all on your doorstep.
I was going to say, are you saying that Kent is not exotic?
I mean, it's literally on my doorstep. I live just south of Biggin Hill.
Oh, so are you actually aware of some of when you're reading it? Are you going, oh, that's just down the road?
Yes, and I have been on a trip to check these places out, so it's very real in my head.
That reminds me of when H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds, and he used to go out on his bicycle and just sort of like work out what would be destroyed in the next chapter of his novel.
You know, to this day, when I hear Leatherhead, my first association is with War of the Worlds, because I read it there before I really knew where it was.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the big things about Moonraker. And I remember when I read this book as a kid. Obviously, in the Roger, for me, it was the Roger Moore years of the cinema Bond. I was kind of grossly disappointed by this novel because I was like, he doesn't go to space. He doesn't even get out of England. But you're absolutely right. This is. Does it kind of make it a different, you were sort of saying it jumps the tracks. Does it kind of almost make it a slightly different genre?
More of a straight thriller, maybe more more like the kind of books that Ian Fleming was springboarding off, the Bulldog Drummondy, John Hannay type. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, sort of John Buchan sort of chase thing, and there's a lot of intrigue in there. You said to me before we started recording that this was your favorite Bond book. What was what elevates it for you?
It's partly the setting. It feels much more immediate and scary that there's this threat right in England than giant squid on some island near Jamaica. I think, yeah, that's probably not going to affect me. The other thing is that spoiler, Bond doesn't get the girl at the end of this one. She breaks it to him that she's engaged to somebody else and walks off. And like a lot of people, I book out of order. I just read what I could pick up. So by the time I got around to this one, I was quite familiar with the formula, and it was a big shock to me that Bond could get turned down, and I liked that.
I mean, this is the third book, but it's also like in each of these books, there seems to be not the philandering Bond that we're used to, certainly from the films, which is a very different creature. But it's also the sense of he seems to be someone who is actually looking for a relationship. He kind of that I get the feeling he's kind of been jilted already twice in the course of three books.
Yes, yeah, he certainly has been unlucky in love. I don't think we find out what happened with Solitaire. I guess a weird foreign psychic is not the basis for a happy relationship, and he was unable to persuade her to come back to London and live in his flat. But yeah, he's in the market, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, Vesper Lind has got a boyfriend that she's obviously so attached to, she's willing to betray her country. Yeah, as you say, Solitaire, she's alluded to some degree in the book, but obviously things haven't worked out. Maybe she just didn't want to come back to England. But yeah, in this one, it is quite radical that you're leading up to a sense of conquest and romantic closure, and she's just not that into you, James.
They also have quite a nice friendship going on throughout the book. Yeah, they have little chats, they go swimming together. It's quite sweet.
That's a very good point. I think that we don't usually think of James Bond as someone who's capable of having a respectful platonic relationship with a woman,
But he doesn't look at every female and go, right, in your pants.
No, absolutely not. And also he's I mean, I come back to this Jeanette Winterson essay that I read a while ago, that he's more interested in clothes than any woman. He's really, oh, you look good in this, and this, and he knows how to put together an outfit, and his drinks
that's interesting. Because he knows how to dress himself, but I don't think he cares that much about it. He doesn't go shopping for clothes. He's just got these old reliable outfits that never go out of style that he throws in his suitcase. But yeah, he's very into what women are wearing and what perfume they have on.
Yeah, I don't know if it's down to like Fleming. I mean, if we're supposed to think it's Fleming, or we're supposed to think it's the character, but every time a woman appears in the Bond books so far, because this is my reread, their clothes are described in remarkable detail, and it's sort of like, wow, this is like Vogue, or it's like a fashion description.
It's interesting because I heard Lindsay Davis, who wrote the sort of Roman detective stories about Marcus Didius Falco, talk, and she said that someone had said to her, "Oh yeah, I can tell these books are written by a woman because Marcus notices clothes way more than most men do."
But here we have the contrary evidence that actually James Bond is noticing, and he's also got some. He's also chooses the best shampoo and the best toothpaste and all this sort
Oops.
of. So we start with, as you say, we sort of begin to find out a little bit more about James Bond's sort of domestic relations, shall we say. One of the things I was fascinated with at the beginning of the book is that you find out how many people are in the double O section.
Yes, and you start to wonder about how many of them are in the office at any one time. Are there times when nobody's got a job to do and it's just awash with testosterone in there?
I was surprised about how few there were because there's only two others. It's just Bond and two others. And Bond is kind of the senior one, I think. So it's like he's got two juniors coming behind him, so to speak.
Presumably, he's the one who's lasted longest without being killed.
Yeah, yeah. Although one of them is already injured, and is sort of coming, I think, in Tokyo or somewhere. He's had a dangerous mission. So that, but you do get a sense much more than you did in the first two novels of this being a department, a government department, and they're having a sort of routine to it.
Yes, I like that as well. I think it's a thing that maybe makes it easier for you to put yourself in Bond's shoes because, hey, we all have boring days at the office.
And he's got, and the detail that's given to his secretary as well, whose name I forget. Is it Lily? I
Oh,
think.
Lilia Ponsonby. I may not be saying her right. I've never met one.
You would have remembered if you'd met one of those.
Yeah, I certainly would.
So you sort of go inside her head as well to sort of see Bond from her point of view, which again, watching the films and sort of hearing quite understandable criticisms of sexism, it's kind of surprising to read the novel and go, oh, okay, we're getting her point of view, even though obviously, you know, she might be thinking a little bit like, well, it's a choice between marriage and a career, and I'm going to choose the career because I'm married to the service. And it's
Yes, and it's a shame, but it's a reflection of the times. I mean, nobody would have questioned then that women were secretaries and they brought the men their files and their coffee.
and sandwiches.
Mm.
So there's some good. There's a bit where I think in the first briefing it's kind of funny that he's really missing his lunch.
Again, we've all been there.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely what you said earlier. It's this sense of sort of Bond's bureaucracy. This is Bond's bureaucracy novel.
Yeah, when he's going through the files about Japanese murder drugs and KGB methods, that's the equivalent of us getting in and going, oh, well, just got to get through the emails, then I'll do some proper work, maybe.
Yeah, I love that bit. I love the bit. It's like, when am I going to need to know about this poison and stuff? It's like Bond does homework.
And because I'd watched the films by then, I thought, at some point in the novel, this is going to come up. He's going to need, because in a movie, every gadget that Q gives him would have a use. But no, he does not need to know about Japanese murder drugs at any point in Moonraker.
You're going to need this for the third act, Q will always say. There's going to be a moment where you'll definitely need this. So the engine of the story, once we've sort of got used to where we are in the novel, and also we have Bond on the firing range, which sort of gives us a sense as well of his preparation. Again, breaks a little bit with normal Bond procedure because M is not giving him a mission, so to speak.
Yes, and this must be the first time we see much unbending from M. Like most of the time, he's just going to he's the big boss, you obey him. We've seen he's got a sense of humour, when he sends Bond on passionate leave at the end of Live and Let Die. So he obviously has quite a nice relationship with Bond, but most of the time it's very, very professional. Certainly in the office, it would be.
And I do like that idea as well of you have this M who has been set up already in the first two novels as being, this sort of austere, professional, slightly untouchable father figure. And then in the third one, we're already comfortable enough to break it and to move it along. And they kind of go on a date.
Yes. And M having personal problems that Bond gets involved with, that's not going to happen in the films for decades at this point.
That's right. That's right. Probably, yeah, not until Judi Dench's
No.
reign.
No, she's pretty much the only one who suggests she might have a life outside work in the movies.
Right, right, absolutely, absolutely. And so the main, well, why don't you explain the sort of mission for us?
Obviously, I did my homework at the last minute, as one always does, and skimmed the book while I was having supper just now. But Glenn's a bit hesitant about calling Bond in because he's got an issue with one of the guys at his club. And this man, Hugo Drax, he's rich. He's made great contributions to this post-war faltering British Empire. Everyone loves him, but he cheats at cards. M is terrified that this will get out of the club and be spread about, and it will ruin Drax's reputation with a knock-on effect for the UK. So in a way, it is work, but it's not official business. It's very, can you just do this off the record? As we know that Bond's good at cards, so M reckons he's got the best shot of figuring out what Drax is doing and scaring him enough to stop without creating a scandal. And they're going to have a booze up and a really nice meal.
And take some drugs.
Yeah,
Champagne and Benzedrine, baby.
what
Champagne.
I do with my boss all the time.
Come on. What's I love the bit in Blades when M is obviously getting quite frustrated with little things that Bond keeps doing, and he's going, no, now what on earth are you doing? And he's like, oh, amphetamine, sir. It's and he even talks about,
Oh, James, I can't take you anywhere.
and it's like I can't. He says something about it. But it makes you a little bit arrogant.
I don't think Bond needs much help there, to be honest.
So we have some backstory about Hugo Drax, which is given here, that he's basically an amnesiac from the Second World War. And this is again sort of a reminder of how close these books are to the war. That, obviously coming out in the 50s. Moonraker is published in 1955, so just 10 years after the end of the Second World War. And so each one of the stories kind of has this shadow of the war over it. So Drax is an amnesiac who's basically been given, they've found his identity to be that of like a Liverpool soldier, like a normal private. And he's, in the meantime, in the intervening years, he's made killing on the stock exchange via trading futures in a very rare metal.
This presumably isn't real, is it? Columbite. It can't exist.
Yeah, it reminds me of sort of unobtainable or whatever.
Yes.
It's, in James Cameron's Avatar.
Yeah, or the new element discovered in the meteor in Tintin and the Shooting Star.
Oh, there you go. And I just watched Francis Ford Coppola's latest film, Megalopolis, and there is a material that goes that Adam Driver invents there, which is biological metal, and yeah, and well, he builds his fortune upon it in a sort of Ayn Rand kind of way. So this sort of inventing a new material and becoming very, very rich in the process is Drax sort of way into this world. But when we meet him, and he's loved by everyone because he's a sort of a Richard Branson figure, or he's giving this to the Queen.
It's funny, when I first read the book, which would have been in the 90s, Richard Branson was exactly my thought, and it actually made me quite suspicious of Richard Branson. Like, what is his ulterior motive when he's offering to buy Concorde for £1 or whatever he's up to?
We've always got to beware of those rich philanthropists. They've always got another reason. So we get to Drax. So we've had this idea of that. I mean, well, a question I want to ask you here, Alice, is right at the beginning, the first time you read this, didn't you just go, he's obviously German, isn't he?
I didn't do that. I certainly thought he's obviously the bad guy. And look at his name, look at his appearance. Yeah, I don't think his Germanness occurred to me at all.
It's just the amnesiac thing. It's just like I immediately thought, oh, we're not buying that, are we? We're not. Someone from Liverpool called Hugo Drax. I don't think so.
Maybe it was less of a trope in the 50s.
Perhaps. So we get to Blades, and we've had some sort of Chekhov's gun maneuvering, if you like, with James Bond's car, because he's getting it sort of vamped up, and that had the feel of, oh, okay, this might come in later.
or you might regret spending all that money on it later.
as well. Yeah, he might wish he'd paid a bit of he'd taken out of an insurance policy. So when we get to I mean, this is an interesting part as well, I think. When we get to Blades, there's a really interesting mixture of Bond, the sort of the quite into the modern international person we've got to know in the first two novels. You've seen him swanning around America, Jamaica, and France. And here he is in this kind of Edwardian club.
Because Bond has a club of his own, but it's obviously not as classy and exclusive as M's.
And there is some argument about why would M belong to this club? I mean, it's actually even for someone who would be the head of the Secret Service, it would be he'd be priced out of it. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, someone must have put in a good word for him.
yeah, either that or he's independently rich, and just is playing at this Secret Service.
Ah, yes, just a lark.
Yeah, precisely. And so this is where we get to meet Drax as well, and we have a whole. I mean, this is what I mean by a date, though. We kind of have a whole dinner with M before we even get there.
Yes, it's not unlike Bond's dinner with Vesper in Casino Royale, thinking about it. A lot of detail about what they eat. They have a little light conversation.
They relax. They sort of ease off each other's shoes. Um, and Drax himself is like he's like abominably rude.
Yes, yes. Hard to believe that this is the beloved figure, unless he's only like that to his peers.
It's something that's strange throughout the book. Everyone keeps going, "Oh, he's amazing," and then whenever he actually speaks or you see him in action, you think he seems like a complete shit. This is why.
And presumably, this isn't how he behaves to the Queen.
I hope not. I certainly hope not. Otherwise, yeah, otherwise he would get short shrift, surely.
Yeah, it's definitely at odds with what the newspapers and the man in the street have to say about him. I guess it's the old cliche about yeah, you've got to see how a person behaves in private if you want to know what they're really like.
Yeah, I guess the idea might be that this is a sort of nouveau riche sort of, he's in this old Blades club and this man's made his own money as a self-made man and made enough to get him in the club, but not made enough to teach him manners.
Ah, yeah, Fleming is really snobby about this stuff, like Goldfinger dressing up for golf. So, well, you don't dress up for golf in fancy golf clothes. You just throw on an old jumper like Bond does.
And there's that idea as well, I think, that Drax is like there is a case that I think Fleming knew about of somebody who cheated at cards. And it was a huge scandal because the Prince of Wales was apparently sat at the table when he did it. And this
Oh,
man, I forget his name, but he was exceptionally, apparently the two things that sort of stood out in his characteristics was that he was one of the most handsome men in the sort of high society, and he was also terribly rude. It was sort of like he'd made rude into his sort of one of his major characteristics. And I kind of wonder if maybe Fleming's doing that a little bit. Obviously, Drax, being a Bond villain, can't be handsome. He has to be sort of what's his oh, he's got red hair. That's one of his main sort of things that Fleming doesn't seem to like about him.
is he the one who he's got some sort of eye problem or injury, so it looks like he can't close them all the way? I
That
get my
sounds
villains mixed up.
that sounds familiar. He's certainly got something a little bit
Or he looks like he sucks his thumb, or yeah, or all of these things.
it's crazy how I mean this is what I kind of love this about Fleming, that he's got these real dislikes and he has absolutely no shame about putting them into his books as this is obviously a sign of villainy.
What is the point of being a writer if you can't just air all your little prejudices and annoyances?
What would be your prejudice or annoyance that you would ascribe to a Bond villain if you had the opportunity?
Ooh, replying to me on Twitter when he doesn't know me and knows nothing about what I'm talking about. That's pretty evil.
I can imagine him doing that while stroking a cat. Mine would be being a man over the age of 11 wearing shorts. That'd be
Gosh,
like, I'm harsh. I'm harsh.
you
You
and
can
my mum both.
you can see why I like Fleming so much. You tell him, Ian.
Are we counting Daniel Craig in this? Because
Yeah, and I guess Sean Connery wears the he wears shorts quite frequently, and he wears
If
this
you're on
sort
a
of
beach, fine, go for it.
yeah, he wears that onesie in Miami at the beginning of Goldfinger as well, which is but it's Sean Connery. He's an exception to everything.
Yeah, Desmond Llewellyn wears shorts in You Only Live Twice, and that's absolutely not on.
That's traumatic.
Put them away, Des.
So it turns out Drax is cheating, and Bond, cooks his bacon in a really. I mean, how do you feel about these card games in novels? I mean, it's kind of a genre all in itself.
Yes, and as a teenager, I found it fascinating because I knew nothing about this world. I'm not sure if coming to it as an adult, I might not have just flipped through it a bit.
Because also, obviously, in the book, it actually has the bridge hands that if you're a bridge expert or player, you would look at that and go, oh, I see he's got a strong hand and the rubber is there and all this sort of stuff I know nothing about.
Oh, yeah, a friend recently taught me bridge, persuading me by saying, "Oh, it's what Bond would do." So I do now have a vague understanding of it, and the game is very simple, but the bluffing could take a lifetime to learn.
Also, it's a little bit in that sense like poker, where actually the exchange of cards is relatively simple, but it's all in the betting, really.
Very much, and I think it's more complicated than poker because you've got a partner, so you've got to think for them and figure out what they might have in their hand and what they might want to do with it.
I remember Fleming was quite self-critical of this novel because he had one idea for a film, which was the latter half of the novel, and he had a sort of short story, which was the bridge part of the novel. And he kind of just stuck them together. Just went, okay. Apparently nobody wants a film, so I'll just stick that on the end of my bridge short story. But I'm not sure. I
Oh,
mean,
that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, I mean, I only found that out recently, and I thought it wasn't something that came up when I was rereading it. It wasn't when I was rereading it, I didn't think, oh, this obviously changes halfway through, but it kind of does.
No, but I quite like that. You get a fairly gentle introduction and then you're chucked into this much bigger plot.
Yeah, things escalate, don't they? Let's face it.
I don't know what to think of the idea that if you cheat at cards, you're probably unreliable in other ways, because we've all turned over one card at a time playing solitaire, right? Doesn't
Oh,
make us dishonest.
but I mean, if you're cheating yourself, I think that's okay. Can you cheat yourself?
Some would say.
It would be a strange Bond novel which started with an extended game of solitaire. I mean, we've already had solitaire in Live and Let Die, so maybe that's why she's not here. Maybe he cheated on solitaire.
Oh,
Oh, bada boom. Oh, very good, very good. I'm pleased with that. So I shall move swiftly on. So we get so then we get this after Bond has won his game and sorted out the information that he is indeed a cheat and therefore needs to be an eye to be kept on him. A murder takes place at this base, which is around your neck of the woods on the coast, isn't it?
yeah. So I'm closer to London, but yeah, I could certainly get to Dover pretty easily.
And this is where he's been working on the rocket, which gives the novel its name, Moonraker. Obviously, it's also a title of a Wilkie Collins novel
So I
from
did
a
not know that. Well, I assumed that it probably does. It came from, yeah, the story of the man who tries to fish the moon out of a pond with a rake because he thinks the
ah
moon's fallen in the pond.
okay. No, I never thought of that, but yeah, that works as well. That works as well.
And
Um,
that's what the theme song for Moonraker is about. It's
I
about a guy trying to fish out this treasure of gold from a pond, but it's just the reflection of the moon. It's nothing to do with the movie.
no, well, and the movie has nothing to do with the book, and
It's
and on we go. So the in the book, Drax is in the final stages of preparing, finishing his rocket, which is the Moonraker, and Bond is going to be sent down as the replacement for the man who's been who's been killed, who's been murdered by one of Drax's men, who says Heil Hitler before killing himself as well, which kind of
Again, we are really not far off from the war here.
not at all. It's kind of like, can you trust not only someone with ginger hair and someone who cheats at cars, but a German at this stage? Can we still trust Germany?
Well, I love that. I think it's the landlord of the pub where it happens when he's narrating this. Oh, and then he goes Heil. Like what an idiot. Not like, ooh, Nazis, they're very scary. Like, what a tit. What did he do that for?
Yeah, yeah, and it sort of spoils his cover story, which is supposed to be like suicidal cover story, which is supposed to be he's jealous of Gala Brand, of the man's relationship with Gala Brand, even though he doesn't have one. But sort of then making a Sieg Heil salute rather rubbishes that, rather makes it seem like this is more personal than it is, more political, sorry, than it is
I mean,
personal.
nobody on Team Drax is at all good at spying and subterfuge. I despair of them, really.
But nobody on Bond's team is. I mean, everybody seems to be so gullible in these books. They're always sort of going, what could possibly go wrong with things which are so self-evidently riddled with problems.
I mean, this is the culture that thought Kim Philby couldn't be doing anything wrong because he was such an upstanding fellow. So that checks out.
Well, exactly. I think you're right. I think this is a sort of like a pre-Philby-esque sort of world of espionage innocence. It's sort of Le Carre comes along and does the post Philby version. I remember a brilliant story. I think it was in Ben McIntyre's book about Philby being given an address to send his packets of intelligence to the Russians, and the address was in Paris, and he was assured that this was very safe and all the rest of it. And one day he was in Paris and he thought, "Oh, I'll just pop by that address and see what the house looks like where I'm sending all these packets." And he turned up and it was the Russian embassy. And he was like, "Oh, okay, not quite as good at spycraft as I thought they were." The happier times, no phones in sight, just people living in the moment. So we're going to Dover now, and before we go to Dover though, Bond needs to go to sort of join the police force almost. He's sort of deputized.
Oh, yes. Oh, and before that, he has to go to work hungover and have a really terrible day at the office, which again, we can all empathize.
You think M would have given him the day off? You think M would have said, "Have a sickie tomorrow, my son.
Yeah,
You've done
but
one for
no.
the team." Yeah. But fortunately, Bond is a great believer in showers. His hot and
Um,
cold showers are like a panacea.
yeah, never really works like that, does it? All the things you think will disguise your terrible state. So, yeah, but just have a really good shower and some coffee, and then I go in. Nobody will know.
But again, that's something that makes Bond kind of a bit of a modern, we read it now and we probably think, yeah, have a shower, that's great. But in 1955, people didn't have showers. People
That's
had
true.
a bath, and they may have had a bath like once a week, twice a week, but Bond has like two or three showers a day. And he's very specific about a hot shower, then cold shower, then hot shower.
So presumably at some point he has had the plumbers into his London flat and been incredibly specific about what he wants. Oh, one of those showers like on the continent.
Exactly. Yeah, that I can really control the temperature, and it's got to be high pressure, and like needles. I want it feel it like needles. There's a little bit of this. It's like a Chelsea flat that he has, isn't it? In
Yeah,
That's interesting as well, I think, because he puts him. This is pre-swinging London. It puts him in a place which is kind of nice, but not too nice. You know, and it's kind of an area that Fleming himself had experience of and had lived in, I think, with his mother at some point in his life.
yes, yeah, I think he had more than one flat or house in that area.
There was the famous converted chapel that Oswald Mosley had before him, the famous British fascist. Another connection with Drax, perhaps. Yeah, so after he's recovered from his day, he has to go to I love the thing that's very relatable as well, that he goes to the police force and he's in the waiting room and suddenly he's like, oh, I feel guilty. What am I doing here?
Yes, yeah, you always feel like you've done something wrong, even if you're returning a wallet you found.
Well, I did that once in Liverpool. I returned this wallet and they said, "Is there anything inside?" I said, "I don't know. I haven't looked." And he went, "Oh yeah." And then they
Oh,
and then they opened it up and there was like 100 quid in there, and it was like, "Ha ha! In your face, unethical uh, policeman, distrustful policeman," as the tears ran down my face. Why didn't I look inside? What a fool I am. Um, yeah, so he now what's the name of the policeman? Valance, I think, is
oh yes.
yeah, he's
And there's a bit of sort of inter-service rivalry, like yeah, Bond shouldn't be doing this really. It's an MI5 job, and the police resent it being taken out of their hands, though it doesn't look like they've done much in the time they've been on this case.
they've just been sort of keeping an eye out, but they don't think Drax is a threat. They're more concerned with the security of the base. They're keeping
Yeah, they're
people
worried there might be some
out.
sabotage.
And it's kind of nuts because as soon as Bond turns up, he does a little bit of detective work in the pub, asking what's actually happened. And as you say, the publican is very forthcoming. And then when he arrives at the base, then I kind of feel we're on more comfortable territory because we get really into that sort of Mr. Bond, feel of him being welcomed into the lair.
Yes, yes, I'm gonna give you a big dinner, though it's a little more reasonable here because they're not at this point enemies. It's not
Hmm.
like, oh, I've caught you sneaking into my base. Have a lovely four-course meal while I explain my plan.
There's this bizarre, and here we were talking about the Avengers earlier. There's this bizarre scene where all of Drax's men have shaved heads, but and they all have mustaches, but the mustaches are all different size
Oh, that
styles.
is very Avengers, isn't it? I never thought of that, but just that sort of weird visual you might get.
And I think one of them even has a Hitlerite mustache as well. So it's like that must have been like he must have won the lottery that day.
You just don't see those anymore,
Funny, funny, funny that
except on Charlie Chaplin impersonators.
there was a comedian, Richard. His name is escaping me, but I shall. He used to have a double act with Stuart Leaf, funnily enough.
Oh, Herring.
Yes, Richard Herring, yes. And he did a one-man show which was about a Hitler mustache. He sort of he grew himself a Hitler mustache and then you know walked around the world, walked around and lived his life normally and found out what people thought of it. But yeah, it's a funny it's a weird. Yeah, we don't see them anymore, indeed. It had to, I mean, I think that's part of the Britishness of this makes this surrealness more, I don't know, acceptable, or there's this ordinariness and then there's these strange things happening.
But yes, there's something quite British about, oh, I'm going to make you all shave your heads for hygiene and then grow moustaches so we can tell you apart.
And then the final explanation, because it's a real that's almost like the most mysterious part of the book, because everything else it's really easy to work out. It's sort of like we're building this rocket ship which looks very much like one of Hitler's old secret weapons, the V rockets which bombarded London in the latter part of the war. So us, potentially German people are going to do this, and there's a lot of emphasis laid on the coordinates that are being put in that have to. So okay, what could possibly go wrong there? So I've kind of figured out more or less what their plan is. They're going to bomb London, their plan. But I'm still thinking, but why the mustaches? What's that? What's that about? And he actually has an explanation at the end. He says, it's very difficult to identify someone if they've got a mustache because that's all you see. And so if somebody then shaves off the
Hmm.
mustache, it's like, oh, I was going to say the guy with a handlebar mustache, but now I don't know the color of his eyes or anything.
It's as easy as that.
Isn't that amazing?
It's like wearing a funny hat. Take it off, you're invisible.
Exactly, exactly. It's Yeah.
He could have gone for funny hats all round.
Yeah, someone wearing a fez, someone with a little propeller going.
Yeah.
At this point, we meet Gala Brand, who is the secretary to Hugo Drax, and working also is under with Special. I think it's kind of interesting that we've had so much time at the very, very beginning inside Lily, the Bond secretary, so that when we get Gala Brand, we're sort of like we're seeing more from that point of view, from that female working girl's point of view, rather than this being sort of an exotic person doing this job. It's like, oh no, no, this is the world is populated.
I suppose he kind of dabbles a bit in the female point of view, and then when he gets to The Spy Who Loved Me, he just goes for it and does the whole novel that way.
Yeah, what do you think of The Spy Who Loved Me?
I'm a fan, partly because it got me interested in scooters, which have been a huge feature of my life since I was about 20. But also because it's very different.
It really is, and I mean, I think he bitterly regretted it because of the reception. But I kind of like the fact that he takes such a swing at it, even though he probably does knock off a couple of innocent bystanders' heads while taking.
I think it's a common problem that authors of something really popular have, that they want to try something new and stretch themselves, but the public goes, no, we would like the same thing, but a little bit different, please.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, but as you say, I do think that Spy Who Loved Me can be seen sort of embryonically in this novel that and maybe even in other novels as we go towards it, in that he is sort of increasingly interested in other people's points of view and not so much Bond's.
Yes, and I suppose characters looking at Bond are a bit like the reader, that what you might think if you saw him. Like, oh, he's quite sexy, but I bet he doesn't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
mean,
probably been my analysis if I saw him.
yeah, and he's sort of like kind of a bit of a cipher, he's kind of there's an emptiness to him, which other people are leading more interesting lives. Because he has to sort of continue being who he is, whereas other people can change. Like Gala Brand can have an arc. Well, isn't really allowed one. Maybe we'll see. Okay, so meeting Gala Brand, having a sort of relationship which is very hostile to begin with. There's a real sort of one of those. I'm here to be very professional, Mr. Bond. Sort of, I'm on the job, and I'm not interested in any hanky panky. And and Bond sort of makes up his mind to you know go swimming naked as a way of breaking the ice, and persuades her to do so as well. Um,
I
and
love that scene, and I love that we learn that Bond wears blue pants.
yeah, and she's worried about getting her underwear wet, and it's like, oh, come on, it'll dry up in no time. Also, just swimming in the sea in England is in itself an adventure.
Yes, I do that frequently, and yes, it is.
The temperature. I mean, when is this set? Is this like February, March? I don't
I
think
think it's
it's.
May,
Ah,
so
okay.
it's a warm day for May, but it's still going to be freezing in the sea.
Yeah, and they almost get killed because of the cliff falls plots. And that sort of he shows his hand, to use a apt gambling term. I love the bit where Bond and Gala sort of turn up like, oh, have you started dinner without us?
See, that is what I was saying earlier about Drax's men being hopeless on the subterfuge front. You don't just not set a place at dinner for the people you're pretty sure you've killed. You've got to act like nothing untoward is going on.
Yeah, even if say the police show up, you've got to be like, "Oh, we've been waiting. We're kind of worried." But they're like, "Oh no, they're good. We packed their suitcases. We've thrown everything out."
Near your desk.
So then we have this situation where they go up to London. There's some subterfuge with safes, with going on the roof and working out what's been going on. And Bond kind of, I think this is one of the first times we see sort of Bond doing a lot of real legwork detective wise. He sort of puzzles things out quite well.
A lot of it's a little bit dull, which is maybe why he doesn't do it often. I mean, To me, it reads a little as if Fleming didn't know quite where it was going and thought, oh, we'll just have Bond investigate a bit and maybe something will occur to me. Maybe I'm maligning him.
Yeah, there is something about stuff being kept in locked drawers, and to your point about Team Drax not being the best at secret planning, you do wonder like you've had quite a lot of time to get rid of all that stuff. You didn't need to leave it in a locked filing cabinet. You could have sort of wheeled that filing cabinet, dropped it in the sea or
Yeah, could have posted it to the Russian embassy in Paris, clearly.
something. Um, and so there is a sort of pax between them that is going to be temporary because we know that Drax suspects and we know that things are not going to go swimming. In London, that I mean, there's this very creepy, almost torture scene with Gala Brand and the German sort of second in command. Who I mean that all that stuff strikes as very well done. It's very
Yes, and it gets worse every time I read it because I was quite young when I first read Bond. I didn't really realize the sort of potential rape implications of what was going on there. So now when I read it, I think, oh God, poor Gala, this is hideous. As a teenager, I was more, oh, stupid woman getting tied up, honestly.
the lack of empathy you had as a teenager. Like all teenagers, it has to be said.
Yeah, just no, sorry.
I'm always really disturbed. This is Casino Royale, of course, but I'm always really disturbed by the way they pull Vesper Lynd's dress over her head as a way of. It's just such a murder slash rape victim crime photograph. It's sort of so
Yes,
dehumanizing.
and it turns her into a sort of helpless little girl almost. I
Yeah.
think that's what Bond feels seeing her. I think it's, oh yeah, you poor little scrap, you're in over your head.
Yeah, it's sort of like no matter how clever you think you are, you're still wearing a dress. I don't know. It freaks me out it's kind of, I think that's in a sense makes it so effective. So Bond is wants to, we have this great set piece chase, whereas I think Eddie Izzard once did a whole routine about how you can't have car chases in novels. It's sort of like, yeah, they sped up, they slowed down for the bend, they sped up again, but of course, Fleming does car chases in several. They're really effective.
Yes, I love this one. I suppose this one and the one in Casino Royale, they're both at night, so you've got there's not going to be much traffic, and there's the headlights and losing sight of the other car, and have they seen you? And in this one, there's a completely innocent bystander who gets in the way and just gets swiped off the road.
And you realize the horrific danger of cars at this period as well. I mean, that guy just gets horribly killed, as you say, and
I didn't realize for a long time that Bond is driving an open car. That's why he's wearing goggles and he's getting dust and flies in his face.
absolutely, yeah. And the I mean, I think the reason that Casino Royale and Moonraker are so effective at these racing scenes is Fleming himself, as a journalist, covered like mountain rallies, so like modern day motor races, but in mountain passes and going at incredible speed, during which participants, drivers, and spectators would frequently be killed with a frequency which was it's kind of horrifying to today's standards. And as a journalist, he not only reported these, but he actually participated as a navigator for one of the British drivers. So he actually sat in the car and
Oh, good
navigated.
grief.
Yeah, so you can see in this writing that he's writing from a sort of place of knowledge that he knows what it feels like to be driving very fast cars very dangerously.
Yeah, I wonder if he knows what it's like to be in a crash because Bond does get hurt. He gets hurt in Casino Royale and in this one. Yeah, it's something he can walk away from, but it's clearly shakes him up.
Oh, he crashed a car in Switzerland in into a train. He got hit. He got sideswiped by a train that he hadn't seen coming, like
Oh,
on a small gauge railway. And according to some writers, this gives him his fear of small gauge railways. So he puts in quite a few in his novels of like bloody things.
But I always look both ways on a level crossing, even if the gates are up. To think, well, you never know.
Oh, yeah, you'd be absolutely crazy not to. Why take your life in your hands for no reason? Um, one of the most effective parts of the chase as well is when the rolls of print paper are being driven by a lorry, and one of Drax's men jumps out and cuts the ropes so that they'll sort of bounce down the hill towards Bond, who's chasing.
Yes, and what? That's quite a plan, and he's got to be quite a man of action to carry it out.
It strikes me as like something out of a Michael Bay movie. It's sort of bad boys. They're dropping cars off the back of a transporter to stop the pursuit.
I mean, it sounds a little bit like a Laurel and Hardy movie.
Michael Bay, Laurel and Hardy. You say potato, I say potato.
And especially when the guy goes, "Oh, it was like the lavatory paper of a giant."
That's true. That is true. And Fleming has some of these wonderful descriptions. When they're finally so the car chase ends in disaster for Bob, pulled and taken away, along with Gala Brand, and they once more find themselves kind of. I mean, going back to your Laurel and Hardy comment, sort of tied up like almost like in a silent movie. It's that
Yes, there's a lot of melodrama here.
they're not exactly tied to railway tracks, but almost because the when the rocket is ignited, destroyed.
And it's a classic, why not just kill them?
But Drax is not very good when it comes to killing people. He wants people to anticipate being killed, and he wants that feeling.
Ah, I suppose it keeps his hands clean as well.
That's it. Yeah, I never, they were in the wrong place at the. And we find out that the rocket is a fully functional, space station. It has a nuclear warhead, and this really brings the novel. I mean, it starts as a novel, I think, about World War II, and it very much ends as a novel about World War III.
Yes, and yeah, I think reading it decades later, it's probably even more horrifying because you maybe know a bit more about the long-term effects of blowing up nuclear stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one thing I've always forget until I reread this book is the nuclear bomb actually goes off.
Yes, and yeah, although hooray, it hasn't hit London, it's got to go off somewhere. And even the middle of the channel, there's quite a horrific and realistic total of destruction, people and boats and the Dutch coast.
Yeah, and someone says, "Oh well, the wind is blowing west, is blowing to the east, so it'll go over Russia, so we're okay." It's just like, yeah, but it's got a few countries to go past before it hits Russia. Yeah. There's a certain blasé attitude towards nuclear safety. Also, again, this is the sort of Laurel and Hardy bit when they sort of jump off when they finish their plan and they jump into their submarine. Of course, they immediately motor off to the epicenter of explosion, hoisted by.
Yes, that is beautifully done. And of course, Bond doesn't get his hands dirty either. It's not his fault that they tootled off in that direction.
But it is sort of supremely satisfying. There's definitely a very macabre humor to that moment.
Yes, and the way it's all concealed from the public, I love that. And it's very believable because I bet there were a few conspiracy theorists afterwards went, oh, yeah, there was something funny about that cloud. And oh, I think there was a cover up. But yeah, nobody will believe them. They'll just go off and make websites about it.
I mean, the huge mushroom cloud that could be seen from three countries. Is that the cloud we're referring to?
Yeah, but that's just normal when something of that size explodes.
Well, that's the explanation, isn't it? Oh no, it's a really big bomb. It was a big bomb. It's just not a nuclear bomb.
And the way everyone's teeth fell out, well, they just weren't using enough fluoride.
Yeah, and don't have any cockles and mussels from Whitby for quite some time.
Oh no.
I mean, what do you think of that conclusion to the book? Because I think it may be the first time we get a real sense of like an expansion of Bond sort of, I mean, destroying London is decidedly bigger than losing a game of cards in Casino Royale or losing some gold in Let Die. I mean, it's the first version of Bond as a kind of city saver, world.
Yes, yeah, saving London and Britain and the world. It's definitely a step up, but
I,
it feels believable and contained. Though you buy it in a way you maybe don't buy some of the things that he does in the films.
Well, Moonraker, the film, for instance, where it is wiping out the entire Earth and repopulating it. Yeah, I find that sort of inflation I mean, Moonraker, fine, it's a comic book film. It's not, no one's supposed to really take it that seriously, I don't think. But I much prefer it when the stakes are relatively low and believable.
And human as well,
Yeah.
because whatever the bad guy is doing, at some point it becomes personal to Bond. It's like, oh, you killed this woman I'm quite attracted to. You were rude to me.
Well, that's a really good point because in this one, it's the motorist who is killed that really unnerves Bond and makes him go, okay,
Mm,
now it's personal. That guy was just, and I mean, knowing Ian Fleming, that guy could just as easily been Ian Fleming or one of his mates, out for a tootle in the car. So that's the moment where you've shown real a lack of decency and you deserve a comeuppance.
yes, it's when you don't care who gets hurt if they're standing in your way. I think that's when Bond decides you're a menace.
Going into sort of the future, where do you feel how do you feel Bond is left by Moonraker? I mean, do you see Moonraker sort of tracing him becoming a different character in each book, or do you feel he's the same character? Is there an evolution with Moonraker?
His two big life-changing events are Vesper betraying him and dying, and then Tracy. And so this sort of early run of books, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever. I feel like he's just kind of knocking along, gaining a little more experience, gaining a few more scars. He's got this big tragic romance in his past, but he's yeah, looking for a little fun. And then we know he's going to have another big tragedy later. And I've got a soft spot for Thunderball because it feels like the last fun Bond adventure, and it's all going to go terribly wrong for him after that. I think, yeah, enjoy the Bahamas, Bond, because you have no idea what's coming.
It's things are getting yeah, things are gonna go heavy, quite sharp. I think the fun element of this, the car chase and the torture, I know Bond. I still feel there's a sort of aching romanticism there. I mean, I know that ending where Gala has a husband, you're supposed to sort of believe, if Bond was a Raymond Chandler character, would just turn up his collar and walk into the rain,
Oh,
played by Bogart. So it's more about him. I agree with you. It's more about him sort of maintaining that coldness rather than sort of adding another layer. It's like, oh, I'm back to where I started, rather than I'd really invest in the relationship.
yes. I get the impression that he hits on quite a lot of women, so he probably has as many misses as hits,
Yeah, he'll have a bit of a cry in the shower and then he'll be okay.
and he'll drive to France on his own and pick up a French girl, quite likely.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's the other thing. It's more like he's disappointed that he hasn't got someone to go on holiday with.
Yes.
But I got two tickets to see Cirque du Soleil. Brilliant. And so, having sort of looked at this book again and following this conversation, are you uh, I was going to say, is it no longer your favorite novel? Having heard me stumble over my ideas about it.
I think we've gone into more depth, and although it's one of the Bond books I've read most, I'm still discovering new things every time I read it and maybe changing my opinions slightly as I get older and as I talk to other people. So no, it's still my favorite, and it just keeps on giving.
I'm always surprised at how well written they are. I mean, I think I went through a period of being very dismissive of Fleming as a writer, thinking, oh, they're good stories, but they're not very well written. And then I reread them and I go, oh, these are actually, brilliantly paced and really exciting and really well described. You feel you're in the world.
Well, somebody asked me once if I thought the books were good writing, and this is a very self-serving answer, but I thought, well, if they weren't, I wouldn't enjoy them. I don't enjoy reading pure trash.
Oh yeah, I've never ever. I don't like the sort of so bad it's good thing. It's no, if you're enjoying it, there's a reason you're enjoying it.
And it's not even terrible writing. It's just if it's a little bit clunky or there's too many adverbs, it's enough to take me out of the story.
Right, right. And I think Fleming, with his experience as a journalist, has actually he's a really economic writer. He really knows how to paint a picture and put you in a place. Um,
Yes, he's brilliant at description without it dragging on and on. Because, yeah, I guess he's from this background where he wants to set the scene in a sentence and then tell you the news.
what's your favorite element of Bond books? What do you have a sort of something that sort of gets you interested and excited even more, or that you come back to?
But the thing I really like, and that for me differentiates Bond from most action heroes, is that he gets hurt and he bleeds and he needs a bit of looking after. He doesn't just keep running with a broken arm.
He
He's got a vulnerability that makes him appeal to me.
he gets really damaged, doesn't he?
Mm.
I think that's what makes a Daniel Craig Bond so interesting, is that, he in Skyfall, when he's doing that medical test and the doctor's saying, well, that knee doesn't really exist anymore and that shoulder's almost gone, and
Yes,
it's
and that's how he would be after that many years in the field.
yeah, it's not made of rubber. It's not it's like Jackie Chan after all those films he made. He's just a massive scar tissue.
Yeah, or yeah, Tom Cruise in some of the Mission Impossibles. Yeah, he wakes up in hospital and he's having a jolly laugh with his mates. And when Bond's in hospital, he's really crotchety about it, as you would be if you were in pain and not getting a lot of sleep. He's a very believable patient.
So I was going to ask you for we do this 007 things I learned about Moonraker, and we could do them together. So, and it doesn't really matter if we do three you for me or vice versa. But do you want to go first?
Okay, so one thing we learned from Moonraker is how to sprinkle a little pepper in your vodka to take any harmful fusel oil to the bottom.
Oh, that's
Useful
a
tip for life.
brilliant tip. Yeah, because of that vodka, especially that Russian vodka, it's not yeah, you can never be quite sure. So yeah, he picked that up in Moscow, doesn't he?
But didn't know enough not to do it in a fancy club.
Fleming went to Moscow when he was working as a journalist for Reuters, and he actually asked Joseph Stalin for an interview, and Stalin sent him a letter back saying, "Thank you very much, but I'm afraid I haven't got time." But he
Oh,
actually had a signed letter from Stalin, which was sort of framed and on his mantelpiece.
and he covered a spy trial, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. One of the I I'm not sure the details, but yeah, it was one of the show trials. Uh, but it did involve, was it British or American?
I think it was British.
Right. Yeah. He had a way of beating the opposition, throwing his notes out of the window, collected by a young boy who would run across, hand them into the wire. So I'm gonna give my second thing we learned from Moon, and I'm gonna go with technology. I think there's the first time that you get a real sense of technology having with the rocket, Moonraker first. We've heard about Smersh, we've heard about the Cold War, only just coming into existence. It doesn't, 1945 doesn't immediately start, it actually starts a little bit before 1945 or a little bit after. And the atomic age, definitely, I thought that was phase change.
Yes, and we will get more tech. It will be less old-fashioned espionage and more, here's a tiny tracking device.
As we go on, less sort of like hair across door jams and things that he has in Casino Royale. I love it in Casino Royale where they Felix Leiter says to him, or Matty says to him, "Oh, they've bugged the room," and he's like, "What? How can they do that? You know, who would want to do that anyway?" It's just like
That's
again,
not fair.
yes, precisely the gullibility. Oh, that's not on. Just not cricket.
Oh.
Okay, number three.
So we talked about this, but we learned that Bond can get turned down, that not every girl falls into his arms.
Yes, excellent. Really good. Really good. Yeah, I think that's a really major twist of the novel. You're, in a way, Solitaire has set you up to think, oh, okay, from now on, he's this irresistible to women. And it's like, well, no, he's not actually. Great, great. I've got a number four, which is this is the book in which Bond that we see the British legal and what Bond's position in that legal. Previously, he's killing people on forums, and so like the CIA, the reason the FBI don't do what the CIA do is because the FBI work domestic answer to their own laws. The CIA can work in Latin America, and if they kill somebody, they're out. And here you see him sort of having to work within the legal of the British, and that asks and answers some questions that we have about. So I think that's interesting intrigue. So number four, Alice.
So I mentioned that I live in Kent and I've actually travelled some of the roads that we get in the novel, and Bond knows these roads. Yeah, he knows how to get down to Dover without messing around in Maidstone and Ashford where it's always busy. Yeah, he knows the side roads. He knows the best way out of London to get southerly. And yeah, I wonder if he knows all of the rest of England like this, or if he just likes Kent and motors around a lot. Because we find out in his obituary in You Only Live Twice that he was brought up in Pet Bottom, where I've also been, and that is down in that part of the world near Canterbury. So I sort of imagine a teen Bond with his first car or motorbike whizzing around those roads.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an interesting thing about that obituary as well is that because the books have gone on much longer than Fleming imagined they would, the age and the date of birth become slightly. So in the obituary, he's born at a certain age. That means that if in Casino Royale he talks about getting his first car, and he would have been 10 years if that was when he got. So there's little things like
I
that.
wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, exactly. You know, he was probably a fast grower. You know, he's fast developer.
Yeah, he's probably
Okay,
allowed to drive around the family estate, sitting on a couple of cushions, peeking through the windscreen.
yeah, he's a Dukes of Hazzard style. It's just brilliant. I've forgotten what number we're up to. Maybe five, six, five, five.
About there.
Yeah, about
I'm
there.
certainly running out of lessons learned quite rapidly.
It's okay. Let's say six then. Um, okay. Well, oh yes, yes. I'm always thinking of Bond's sort of skill set, and I think we see that demonstrated here in more ways than one. One of the skill sets is the ability to play cards, as you mentioned earlier. Luck seems to be like his superpower. He just seems to get lucky all the time. But you also see him at the firing range. Doing, he's obviously a really good shot. And I kind of like the way that that's reinforced because that makes some of the shenanigans that take place in later books more credible because he can actually hit people at long range with weapons that you wouldn't normally think would do that.
Yes, and it's why he's picked for the job in the Living Daylights.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I think as well the second person he killed to get his double O, which is mentioned in Casino Royale, is like a Japanese cipher clerk, and he one of the guys shoots the hole in the window, and he shoots through the hole, which is like
Oh,
that's
yes.
quite impressive. And I think that is kind of referred to in Skyfall, where you have the guy setting up the rifle in the Tokyo skyscraper. Okay, so what's the last one? I think we're going to say it's number seven, unless you've got another couple.
No, well, certainly I and a lot of other people will have learned what benzodrine was from this novel, and that Bond isn't above taking a recreational drug or two to sharpen his skills. I learned a long time later that RAF pilots in the Second World War, in particular, also took this stuff to keep them going and keep them alert on long, long days of missions.
Yeah, there's
So I'm
absolutely.
not sure drug use comes up again.
That'll be one to keep an eye on. Yeah, I mean, he certainly talks about sort of heroin smuggling and things like that as criminal activity, but I'm not sure if Bond himself is.
Yes, yeah, these are all bad things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think Goldfinger he kills a heroin smuggler. Definitely in the film he says, perhaps he shouldn't fund his revolution with heroin-laced bananas. Um, that was a terrible impersonation, but I couldn't help myself. Um, yeah, there's a really interesting book that was out a few years ago called Blitzed, which was about the German army's use of drugs in the Blitzkrieg, and basically they were all yeah, absolutely taking major pharmaceuticals in order to march for 23 hours in a day, and the
Mm.
Luftwaffe so they could fly round the clock missions. And I think Fleming, when he was working at the Ministry of Defense and seconded to them via the Navy, was certainly going to be distributing and using pharmaceuticals to keep himself and other people around him working, inhuman hours as part of his mission. Although not in the field, it has to be said. As in,
I
he didn't
think
ever go.
in just remember that in From a View to a Kill, he just pops some glucose tablets, so he's calmed down a lot between those.
I mean, that goes with the drinking a little bit as well of sort of like there's such a phenomenal amount of eating and drinking that it's kind of like you need the drugs just to cut through that, because I would just be wanting to constantly snooze if I was consuming anything like that. It's like watching Mad Men. If I was drinking what they were drinking in Mad Men, I'd just be lying on the floor.
Yes, you certainly can't go back to your desk after lunch, but apparently people could.
Amazing stuff. Amazing. Well, listen, Alice, thank you so much for joining me at the book club. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Yes, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me on.